It's a real pleasure to be here today, and thanks so much for inviting me. I've helped out with the Tree Summit before, and it's always a pleasure. I am a research scientist, and as you can see, not necessarily a professional teacher or presenter, but I liked what Professor Ziegler was saying with the benefits, the ecosystem benefits and services of cities being an attraction into this study and field of work. For me, it was sort of the other way around. My interest is in the fundamental biology of trees, and have worked since the 1970s on how trees respond to injury and infection and environmental change. And I did say I wasn't a teacher, but I do have to say that we all need to be teachers all the time, that this is the opportunity we have to convey information and helpful tips to coworkers and to partners and the interested public. Now, the title here, it might seem a little bit funny to some, but I think this is really hitting on some of the real major changes in consciousness about tree disease and forest health, both on wild and urban forests, as well as wild and rural forests, as well as the urban forests. That disease is a concept that really comes out of agriculture and forestry. That is to say, some situation or organism that has an impact on a yield of a desirable crop. Decay, we tend to think of negatively, as the biological breakdown of organic carbon that was formerly living stuff. The urban environment, now we've got trees that either were there at the time of settlement, or more likely the case, trees introduced as the human infrastructure expands into their world, and it can be kind of an uneasy relationship, or it can be a real joyful relationship, and I was hearing that earlier this morning. The key concept that I want to get across is that healthy urban forests, and that's what we're after, right? Healthy urban forests contain pests and pathogens, but they also contain partners and fellow travelers. And that concept of fellow travelers, I get calls, and I don't know how people get my phone number, but people do. Calls about what is this going on with this tree, or are these mushrooms on the lawn a problem? And often it's just a question of, how do I get rid of this? For me, that's an opportunity for engagement, and that's what I hope that we can get to here. If we look where trees have developed, now I'm zooming in from Maine, my home in Portland, Maine. This is a view from central New Hampshire, and here's a view from more northern Maine. Here we've got life and death, productivity. We've got big trees, little trees, a range of species, a range of age, quite a lot of diversity. And of course, the trees are what attracts our attention, as they should, but there's that whole universe of other creatures that are associated with them. Where the concept of disease as a impairment or a loss comes from commercial forestry, primarily, working, and there's a bias that comes from that. Now, it's an understandable bias, because forestry is trying to produce board feet of clear wood, or at least that's traditional extractive forestry. But that's not what we're interested in here when we're trying to maintain trees in an environment which may not be the most hospitable for trees. And yet they are so important to making our cities livable. And I guess that is the thing that pulls me out from my pure research head into the urban forestry conceptual world is that for us to continue living on Earth, we're going to need to live in cities, and we need to have the cities be livable places. So that's what draws me into this. Now, some of the things that we encounter in the urban forest are sometimes quite dramatic, but are usually trivial. And we recognize powdery mildews on, this is an oak leaf, but on lilac and other species. It can be a problem that requires remediation, but usually it's just part of nature. And one of the interesting things with the biology of the powdery mildew fungi, and it's a group of fungi, is that they like dry environments early in the spring. We think of fungus diseases as being a product of moisture, and they are, except when they aren't. And with powdery mildews, that's one of the cases. Tar spot is something that we're getting hit now with just outside my window. And so folks think of this as a disease of August conditions and late in the growing season. Yet the infection of these leaves occurred, in May, or as the leaves were coming out. So all I'm trying to say here is that when we're trying to relate environmental factors to the progress of these symptoms or these diseases, it's not always contemporaneous. What set up the tar spot now were conditions months ago. Now, I'm showing those two just as examples of real diseases with real organisms that usually are trivial in impact, but we need to convey that sometimes to managers and certainly to the general public who are concerned. Another example that I see all the time in the urban and community forest is branch shedding. And that's natural, that as trees grow taller and crowns grow together, shade is produced, and that shade promotes, the shade reduces the ability of branches to provide their function of having leaves and foliage and doing photosynthesis. And what's wonderful is that the branch shedding process itself is facilitated by decay fungi. So if I were to look at this image, I could say, well, look at that, that's that branch is rotting away. Yes, and that's doing a favor for the tree in that will facilitate the closure of the at the branch base, and that getting rid of this stub is probably a good thing for the rest of the tree, and that's what's going on here. You see this all the time, but this is an opportunity to get across to people that wood decay is part of the standard development of trees and is not in and of itself a sign of a problem for the tree. And in fact, we see this all the time, what I call breakaway stubs, that here on this maple, that the wood is decayed in the branch, and it's very easy then, after a certain amount of decay, for that to break. And where does it break? Right to the outside of the branch collar. And that's and that would be the position just to outside of the branch collar where you would make a proper pruning cut. So the biology of the system here, this interacting system of wood decay and tree development, is what it teaches us where pruning can be effective and with the least amount of damage to the tree. And the reason for that is that the tree produces pre-formed boundaries at the base of branches. Most trees, both conifers and hardwoods, tend to do this. And you can see here that the decay, this is an American beech, but you can see that the discoloration and decay process comes to the stem, but is forestalled by the native anatomy and physiology of the tree of producing these boundaries at the branch bases. And this also illustrates that if you cut flushly across the branch base, you would be cutting off that protection zone and causing greater damage with the tree. Now, here's a decay fungus, and yes, it is a decay fungus, and I put these in the cleanup crew category, that this is a fungus I most often see on branches that are being shed in a crown. It's not causing a disease of the tree itself, but it is taking advantage of having dead wood above ground. Though when we see this particular fungus on the ground, it's usually because of a branch having broken off. Other areas where we see decay and that I get calls on all the time are really not about trees, and because the trees are not in isolation here. And with the decay of lawn thatch, and this introduces this whole fungi that are making a living not in disturbing the trees, but in degrading the organic matter in the thatch layer in lawns. And as we know, it can become quite the fruiting can be quite dense. I know I know some people don't like these fungi coming up in their lawns, but I have been able to convince people that it's as part of nature and part of seasonality. It can be something to note of nature, even in the urban environment, and maybe even something to get some pleasure or interest in how these creatures are making a living. Now, the thing is that there are a lot of fungi out there in the world. Also on the thatch as a decomposer, the common meadow mushroom. Anyone would be a fool to go on my recommendation purely, but this is a fine edible mushroom, and it's readily available if you know what to look for, here with these pink gills closely capped, and is another part of the common environment that we find ourselves in. Mulch fungi get a lot of attention as well in urban plantings, and the inky cap groups. This is quite a common one here, and this one I find even between like bricks and paving stones. This little inky cap. This is the one that is also quite common, and is also considered an edible, but it does cause, this is the one that interacts badly with alcohol in the system. So it's similar to an antabuse sort of response to eating this one with alcohol. So that is not advised, but again, it's part of the natural environment here. If we look, and this is just, sort of a garden picture in mulch right at the edge of a park where people have been putting in little cutesy things, and that's fine. But I'm drawing your attention to these little guys. And those little guys are bird nest fungi. Now, isn't it amazing? These are common. I see them wherever I go because I'm looking close at the mulch. Where you may have gotten calls about these is that the little structures that are contained within these bird nests, and these are about 5 millimeters or so across, so they're pretty small, but these sporangia are able to be forcibly ejected out of their cups, and often can hit house siding or cars parked next to the mulch. So if you get calls on with concerns with that, it is with the bird nest fungi. Again, it's something that I think of as a part of nature and can be a interface for engagement. I know it sounds like that would be negative engagement, but this is where education is a business we all need to be in. And then there are fungi. No, there's no fungi from outer space, at least not that I know of. But, I get calls about the cedar apple rust, the teleal horns, which don't last very long on the tree. And this is on a juniper, on the red cedar. And they're quite remarkable when folks see them. And again, there's something that people get concerned about. but generally are benign. Now, if you're in apple production or are growing juniper for fence posts or something, okay, there may be some control measures that need to be taken. But in most cases, it's a part of nature. One of the first foliage coloration into the summer is the spots that are caused on the apples that is the alternate host for this rust fungus. Now, this one is I put in the outer space category. It's not a true fungus; it's a slime mold, but mycologists have traditionally studied them. And these are this is an organism which, well, the common name would be the dog vomit fungus, and I suppose you can see why. But these are interesting because they actually move across these plasmodia, and this is several inches across, can move across a mulched area because they have an amoeboid state, sort of like they do look like amoeba under the microscope, yet they aggregate and can move. And people do sometimes get spooked with this being on one part of the yard or one part of the mulched bed today and in a different part tomorrow. Entirely benign to, as far as we know, to everything, but and part of nature here. Now, for stem decay and root decay, now some of these may be the fungi that are most of concern for this particular group, and in understanding what these processes are about, I need to touch for a moment on compartmentalization of decay in trees. This particular booklet here was written by Alex Shigo and published in the 1970s, and freely available on the internet as a government document. And what compartmentalization is about. Compartmentalization is a conceptual framework to understand how trees grow and defend themselves. And that was from Shigo's 1984 review of the subject. And the point I'm trying to get across here with compartmentalization is that growth and defense with trees are integrated into the same processes. I mean, the trees grow in a way that enables them to defend themselves through just the natural situations that trees have to deal with: windstorms, ice, fire, mechanical impacts from the human environment. And Shigo here on the left did a lot of work, and I'm sure some of you had the pleasure of sessions with him, and this is us poking over a chunk of yellow birch there a few years back. Now, this is the sulfur shelf, or some folks call it chicken of the woods. It's interesting on a biological point because these are decay fungi, and they have the potential to cause structural weakness in the tree, but it's the mere presence of the fungus. I've seen individual trees remain apparently sound for years and years after the first appearance of the sulfur shelf. So again, the mere presence of the fungus is not a reason to remove the tree. Similarly, here in northern New England, but I've seen it further south too. This is the Climacodon, the northern toothed fungus, use the common name, the northern toothed fungus here, and this is within walking distance of my house, and they're fruiting now. And the name of the fungus, I mean, you see these names and they seem, like just gobbledygook, but it really isn't true. The climac part here is from a Greek root, and it relates to the rungs of a ladder. And you see here, the don part relates to them being teeth on the underside of these brackets. So it's the staircase toothed fungus, and the septentrionalis refers to the north wind. So this is the toothed ladder-like fungus that comes in on the north wind. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, you know, I work with the city arborist in keeping track of these trees here in this particular cemetery. And again, we've been tracking individual trees on multiple decade timescales that are doing fine even with these particular infections. Now this one, I saw it walking, this is again just a few blocks from my house, and the Bonderzuia, when I was in school, it was a Polyporus berkeley. Don't let the name changes throw you too much. But here on this tree, it's gotten the double marks for removal from the city, and that was probably a reasonable call. What's interesting is that I did not put that "please do not disturb the mushrooms" sign out there. I think the homeowner did, and so again, it shows some opportunity for engagement, both on the positive and on the negative. We need to accept that the fungi are part of our world, yet yes, indeed, there are trees that will need to be removed because of risk from structural failure due to decay. And so this is the dance that we're doing between property ownership and land management and personal and urban responsibility. So this matter really relates to a lot of those forces. Now, one of the things that I see with urban trees, and I mean, it's just because of me studying it for 40 years or so, but you know, what are they thinking here? And what I want to draw your attention to is this thing. Let's get a closer look. Yeah, these Ganoderma, which can be quite a serious wood decay fungus that should cause, that should induce extra attention, should bring extra attention onto itself by whoever's responsible for the tree. But I don't know what this thing is. At first I thought it was something to do with irrigation, but then it looks more like electrical conduit. I don't know, but you can see that it really has been girdling or restricting the development of the tree. So so that's why I am opening this part up as to, you know, what are they thinking about? What are people thinking about? Even worse case here, this is, I like the city of New York, the pictures of Central Park. This is around Rockefeller Center in New York. And these are wonderful brass, you know, Art Deco grates, which are lovely, but there's no way you can adjust the aperture size here for the tree. So so using these means that you need to be prepared for a fairly short rotation, and again, a little Ganoderma coming out at the base. And I can say I've been back to this area, and that tree has been removed. When I talked to the horticulture folks responsible for Radio City, they just shook their heads saying that those grates are worth a lot more than any tree we would put in there. So, okay, I mean, it's not, you know, that's not a call for me to make. What I want to do now, after having talked about the fungi as being a natural part of the system, and that decay being a benefit, can be a benefit to the tree for branch shedding, and it's certainly just a part of life for trees, I do want to give a little bit of attention to fungi, that when we find trees that are infected and showing signs, that they need to have more examination or more frequent monitoring. And so I'm going to hit a few of those here. Armillaria root disease is sort of a funny one, because in nature, armillaria is pretty hard to find in wild forests. I can find it in areas that have been cut with selective cutting and bringing in some machinery to remove individual trees. And so it will come in with following human activity. In the urban environment, it's probably you can argue with this, but I think as a grouping, armillaria is in like the top 1 or 2 group of fungi, and then in terms of being a threat to urban trees. And so these are the honey mushrooms that are associated with the roots. And here we've got, let me get a little closer here. Yeah, these are the shoestrings, which are characteristic of many of the armillaria species. And these are foraging structures that the fungus uses. And when I say foraging, that's exactly what I mean. The fungus can go out for tens of meters. I have followed Phil Wargo, a researcher on this, and I have followed individual rhizomorph assemblages, at least 10 meters, at least 30 feet. So I mean, they're out there from a stump or from an infected root system looking for more trees to infect, and that the trees they infect are the ones with damaged root systems from just about always from machinery, from human activity. And then when a tree gets removed, often it will really promote a heavy fruiting of armillaria. Now, this is the jack-o'-lantern, which is not decaying the tree. It's probably working on small bits of wood and maybe shed roots. But I'm introducing this photo to say that there are lookalikes, though with a simple amount of training and guides, you can learn to recognize it. But the Omphallotus here, the jack-o'-lantern fungus, although it appears similar and may be in a similar spatial position, it should not be a cause for alarm in terms of tree structural stability. Next group of fungi I want to look at that should give you cause or pause are the Ganoderma group. This is the artist's conch. Now, of course, this is on a tree lying on the forest floor, but we do find them on trees in parks and cities. This is common, native to North America. It also is promoted by wounding of trees. It can take several years to develop, but again, the mere presence of a fungus fruiting body should not be a reason to remove a tree. Yet once these are noted on a tree, there should be some extra monitoring to pay attention. Now, this is another Ganoderma and also native here, and it's, I put the question mark there because this is a group where there is some discussion amongst experts. There is a lot of popular interest in this one as being the reishi mushroom or the Linji mushroom of medicinal purposes. And I have no opinion on that. I mean, I can refer people to papers. I do know that culturally, yes, this has been used in Asia as medicine, but I get more and more calls about it. And those of us who work with urban trees will need to come to grips some with the collecting of these medicinals in our urban community. I'm not a policy person. I don't know what that policy should be, but be aware, at least up here in New England, it's definitely happening. Another Ganoderma that doesn't have a stipe or a stalk, that's what this sessile means. And it's, see, this one's got a little stipe or stalk. This one does not. This is a more serious problem. And again, when this appears, a tree really should be assessed for structural stability. Now, this is sort of a tricky one. And I mentioned at the outset of urban forestry and urban plant pathology as inheriting forest pathology for timber products. And the reason that's important to me is that there's a whole range of decay fungi that are troublesome in the urban environment that you will find very little reference to in forest pathology textbooks because they're not a problem in timber production. And this is the next one here. Norway maple. This was a street of Norway maple here in Portland, and they've been being removed because of this next fungus. I just want to show here, there's a little bit of crown dieback, but on the whole, for an urban tree, this actually looks pretty good. I mean, growing into the lines is not so nice, but you know, this doesn't look so bad. At the base, we can see this very fairly thin fungus of the brittle cinder fungus. Let's get the name up there. There we go. And this is one that is not dealt with very much at all in forest pathology or tree pathology textbooks, but in the urban environment, both here and in Northern Europe, this is one of the big ones. I have a couple of the synonyms on there, but brittle cinder fungus. Part of the problem is that for most of the year, this thin layer or crust of fungus, it has some bumps in it. It is brittle cinder. Probably nobody knows what a cinder is anymore, but these tend to blacken with age. It's quite thin and it's easy to miss if you haven't had someone lead you by the hand and say, okay, here it is. The white parts are the asexual spores being produced, and that only occurs for a few weeks out of the year. So most of the time it's either gray or black, right near ground level. This should be a fungus of concern when we see it. One that I see a lot in the urban environment, and I'm lumping several genera here, but little saprotters. Now, by saprotter, I mean a fungus that's infecting the sapwood on the outer part of a tree. Here we can see one going up there. Here's a little bit more of a close-up on the stereum. This is a sort of infection that's only occurring. The fungus doesn't go very deep, but it's killing the vascular cambium and the new cell generator and the new cells in the xylem and phloem that are conducting sugar and conducting water. And I haven't seen trees grow out of this. So it's often not in pathology courses as being a particular problem, because if you're growing trees for timber, this part all comes off at the sawmill. So it isn't causing a great degradation of wood for products, but it can cause great degradation and mortality and loss of structural integrity for trees. So this is a stereum of some sort, this little tricaptum you see all the time. These are circumpolar fungi. That is to say, on a map on my office in Durham, I have a map with the polar projection. So the Arctic, the North Pole is in the middle, and then everything else radiates around it. And this is one of those fungi that all the way around occurs, and it's very useful in forest ecology in just the natural processes, because this is a fungus that helps reduce stand density. So it helps reduce the number of small diameter trees that then leads to the production of fewer larger trees. So it does have a role in nature, but this is serious for arborists in climbing, because the presence of these fungi on the outermost cylinder can greatly reduce the structural integrity for climbing arborists. And probably most of my work in urban forestry is not so much on the urban forestry planning part, but with arborists of how to deal with these trees as they occur. Now, mycorrhizal partners, I had talked about partners, and by golly, these are they. There's all that a mycorrhiza is a symbiosis between a plant root, and we're looking at tree roots today, tree roots and fungi. And what the mycorrhizal association enables the tree to do is that the tree uses expends some sugar at promoting and then feeding the fungal partner. And what the fungus provides is enhanced ability to take up elements, especially phosphorus, an essential element for tree growth. It also provides some protection from drought and also can help with nitrogen uptake. So mycorrhizal partners, this is a kind of a cute one. I was just, I don't know my boletes very well, but this is a nice one, also a good edible. And look at the colors here. Isn't this just, you know, such a wonder to behold, and it freely available. Took this picture just a week or so ago on a walk from my house. So these are available in the urban environment. And to go on a little bit more about the relationship of trees to the soil, most of the carbon storage in forests, in wild forests, is in the soil. And I bet you that's often the case in urban forests as well. And it's the ability of these decay fungi. See, some these fungi that are mycorrhizal are often also decay fungi as well. And so this one can feed off of the thatch in the grass, but it can also form these relationships in roots. And this is something that, as a teaching opportunity, and a way for engagement, because there's so much in the press. Every time I look at the news, there's someone written a new book about trees communicating with each other, and it's a great thing. I'm really glad that that's out there. The problem that I have is that this isn't new. I mean, it's been in the science stuff at least 50 years, and the first papers on mycorrhizae in the German language in the 1880s talked about these relationships. But what it tells me is that we as scientists have not done a very good job at popularizing. So I'm really glad that there are these people that are perhaps non-scientists, but are making these efforts at introducing people to these relationships. What I have here is simply from pulling up a oak seedling in my backyard, a volunteer, just, you know, kind of in a waste area. I know there are no waste areas, I understand that, but in a waste area. And see, look, and so this is something that so what are we looking at here? We're looking at roots of the tree, which have been ramifying through the leaf litter. And the fact that I can see little inflated ends to these small branch roots, small fine roots, or you could call them absorbing roots. The reason I don't like saying absorbing roots is that makes it sound like it's a passive process, you know, sort of like Bounty paper towels, the quicker picker upper, you know, and that's the last thing that it is. It isn't absorbent that way. There's a lot of real dynamic energy consumption there on the tree's part to encourage these relationships to form, and then from the fungi to do the work that the fungi do. So one of the things with tree nutrition is that phosphorus as an element is fairly immobile. It's hard to move around in the soil, but the mycorrhizal fungi are 10,000 times 4 orders of magnitude more efficient at taking up phosphorus than roots that are uninfected are. So this is really where getting the bang for the buck is in encouraging these relationships that help provide trees the proper nutrition. Tree roots also release a lot of sugar and some biological molecules into the soil that favors the growth of the bacteria that fix nitrogen, that fix nitrogen, and that actually are producing their own fertilizer. So anyway, all I can say is that this is a result of just pulling up a oak seedling, going through the layers of the duff on the floor of the soil and seeing these wonderful little tips. Now, you can wash them up and use a nice microscope, to get these bead on a string sort of approach or sort of appearance. And that's a big part of, as an indicator, don't need a fancy equipment or anything, but just to see that that's what the, to see that the relationship is happening. Now, I love it with these guys also in that the more than one fungus can infect the root. And this is, again, in a red oak. And so there's a ascomycete here on these guys. And this is probably a laccaria or basidiomycete here. The reason I'm saying that to you now is that those 2 groups of fungi are evolutionarily very wide apart. But when you get convergence like this of similar answers to the need of how do trees maintain their nutrition, how do fungi maintain their sources of nutrition, that the fact that it occurs in taxonomically different species and groups of fungi tell me how important it is from the ecological point of view, that different organisms through the passing of time have resulted in this convergence of activity. When I was in school, I was taught that that roots were leaky. That roots would leak sugar or leak amino acids into the soil. And that always sort of bothered me because it makes it sound as if the tree is being careless, that the tree is not taking care of business. I mean, it's done all of this work in acquiring this energy, and then it's frittering it away into the soil. But that's completely wrong-headed, that what the tree is doing is maintaining and promoting, not just maintaining, promoting an environment that supports trees itself and other trees to live in. And so that sort of cooperative result is what we see all the time in nature, but we're only beginning to appreciate the value of it. Oh, here we go. So this is in Boston, but could be most anywhere. So the challenge for me is to understand that we share this urban environment, both with trees and their associates, and that some of those associates are indeed decay and organisms of decay and decomposition. The thing is not to immediately get the knee jerk that a healthy environment is one where there is no disease. First of all, it's impossible. You're not going to get it. I mean, you're a pretty poor forest pathologist if you can't find a disease on pretty much every tree you look at. The thing is that in and of itself isn't the problem. The challenge and the real frontier is developing thresholds and indicators of when should action be taken, what are actionable levels of disease, and I don't think we're there yet, but at least we're getting further along with the idea that with more and more of the professionals that I talk to, land managers, are realizing that just the mere presence of disease is not a reason for tree removal. If we want to promote larger, longer-lived trees, and that's the sense I'm getting, is that we want larger, longer-lived trees, then paying attention to these organisms is a path out. If we want 100% structural safety all the time, we would have very few trees. And I know these are touchy subjects, but this is where the conversation, I think, needs to tend towards. And thank you. I think I'm happy to have some questions now.
Great, thank you, Kevin. It's always good to have a different perspective on decay in our trees. We do have one question from the audience. If anyone has any others, please feel free to put those into the Q&A box. And also a reminder, the CU link for the LA credits is in the chat box right now. And we'll be putting the rest of the credit links at the end of the next presentation. So the first question is, does the size of the fruiting body indicate extent of decay?
Thank you. Excellent question. See, I almost repeated the question because I'm used to doing this in person. So that's that. So to me, that's funny. I'm sorry. And the quick answer is no, but. So you have to know a little bit about the biology of the decay fungus involved. That Bondarzuia, that was the big root rotter that had the little sign, "Please don't disturb the mushrooms." That's known as pretty much producing the largest fruiting bodies. 40 kilos I've seen written up for big ones. That was not as big as that one. So the fungus fruiting body is designed for the efficient spread of spores. And so there are different strategies on doing that. I have found quite extensive decays with Ganoderma and certainly the Kretschmaria, the brittle crust fungus, of being quite small, yet the extent of decays are quite large. Now, this will sound like a luxury, but it's a luxury available to us. The thing how to learn about these things is to look at them. So when crews are actually doing tree removals, maybe it's for disease or decay, maybe it's for building or construction purposes, have some educational sessions where you actually just look and do the dissection and see. The problem with removing, new topic, new thought. I do have to say that merely removing the decay fungus, that the fruiting body or the conch, is not going to help control the infection. The infection occurs above and beyond where we see the fruiting body. And in terms of volume, the fruiting of the fungus, the fruiting body is actually a fairly small part of the volume relative to the volume of wood that's infected. So no, the easy fix of going around and knocking them off, no, it's not going to do it. Same way that if you whack which is okay to do, but if you whack the fairy ring mushrooms with a lawnmower, you may help spread the mushroom, the fungus around, but you're not going to be reducing future infections.
Okay. Now, for ID, do you have any specific field guide you recommend?
Well, that's an excellent question. Yeah, here we go. I was just looking. These books back here are not for show, ladies and gentlemen. I actually use these. I like this one, and I will read the title, but I know we're in the recording here. Wood Decay Fungi by Chris Luley. It's a short, how short is it? 60 pages with lots of photos. I like this one to get things started. The problem with most decay guides, and I've written a couple of them myself for Western US species. The problem with them is that just visual characteristics of the macro fungus can lead you astray. But Chris does a good job at pointing out decay fungi that are the characteristics that you can tell through simple examination. The books the problem is that the books that professionals use often don't have any pictures at all. I mean, or if they do have pictures, they're through a microscope at spore attachment and stuff. There are lots of fungus guides out there. I think the development of one for arborists, the Chris Luley one is the closest for arborists and for urban tree management, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement there.
All right. Next one from Sally K. Are you aware of any preliminary actionable thresholds or indicators published or posted?
No, I don't.
Fungus.
No, I don't. I mean, we're still at the seat of the pants gut reaction, and then it relates to the psychology of the practitioner more than anything else. That is to say, where are you on the better safe than sorry spectrum, right? And maybe on the other end of that spectrum is what I refer to and this has happened more than a few times, of being brought to look at a large specimen veteran tree that is really like a deity tree for the folks around. And then sometimes all I can do is the Clint Eastwood response of, are you feeling lucky? Which is not very satisfying. No, and I'm not belittling. The question's an excellent question. I mean, what I'm trying to do here is identify those twin things. First of all, that fungi on the whole are good, and whether they're good or not, you're not going to get around them, but they're good. They are good, and they are essential for the workings of this whole shebang, but also they can present risks that need to be actively managed. And I don't see those are incompatible, but to get to that point, we need to learn more. And on that process of learning more, at least for me, I get confused at a higher level of misunderstanding. And maybe that's the process that we're going through here. So, yeah.
I guess related to like beneficial fungi, but I've seen products out there with, I guess, to apply mycorrhizae. Are those effective treatments, and like, do they actually survive in the soil? Right.
There are are mycorrhizal inoculants, and the primary research on that in the 1960s and 70s was looking at reclaiming heavily damaged environments. I'm talking like mine spoils. I mean, seriously disturbed sites, and like toxic waste dumps and stuff. Okay, so that was what was being looked at. The more your soil is like that versus a natural woodland soil, the greater value there might be of mycorrhizal inoculants. But I'm putting the might in there, that the question, Andy, you hit it there, is having the organism survive in the soil. If you're at a post-construction site, so we're not at a mine spoils anymore, but after a construction site where maybe all the topsoil's been removed, and then maybe the topsoil may be added back, mycorrhizal inoculants may well play a role with that, but but there needs to be enough stuff in the soil to support the life of the mycorrhizal fungus. And that means adequate moisture, adequate organic matter. So it does take some site preparation. It's not just a question of sprinkling the propagules on top or injecting them with a injection device. So this is where they certainly can have a role to play. I do have to say that there have been a few, not many, but a few studies questioning the viability of the propagules and the product themselves. What I recommend and what I do is look around for an area of maybe decaying leaf mulch or wood chips, and using some of that composted decaying matter and using some of that to as a soil amendment. So this is adding the fungi that are active already in the area. So I'm not speaking against the commercial products. I'm just saying that for some of us, if we have access, we can get to the fungi directly.
Great. What would you consider the most authoritative, useful resource for arborists with a moderate understanding of plant pathology to look up fungus when making a management decision?
Yep. Mushrooms in North America is good. Orson Miller's book. It is good. And I think it is still in print. I know this is in print. Mushrooms of Northeastern North America by the Bissetts, Alan and Arlene Bissett and David Fisher. Mushrooms of Northeastern North America. These are good. There are a lot of good books out there. And this is where I'm sorry, I know this is going to frustrate people. The best book is several books. And the best field guide still will require a good hand lens. Microscopes help. I understand that's beyond the bounds for most, but a good magnifying glass, and I have one just out of reach here, is necessary. But no, those are good. But the problem is that none of these books are really written to meet the needs that we're talking about here precisely. And that's the problem with the forest pathology books that are more oriented towards production forestry. And again, I'm not speaking bad or ill of anybody or anything. I'm just saying that the orientation in urban tree pathology has often been encumbered by the biases of timber pathology. That's a personal view of mine. You can accept it or not.
All right, thank you. I think we have one last question we can ask. Are many certified arborists taking trees down prematurely when they find decay, fungal infections? What is the standard they use?
Yes, I think trees are removed when they don't need to be removed. Yes, that does happen. And it's and a certain amount of that is that psychological spectrum of where are you? I mean, if I go to a financial advisor, and I know nothing about money, but run with me here. The first thing that the financial advisor will ask after seeing my bank account is how much risk am I willing to take, right? That's the first thing that they ask. And I don't want to take any risk. And I want to have the highest returns possible. Well, all righty then. So this is to me where the frontier is in developing these, and is it even possible to develop actionable thresholds that you can write out and have it be beyond just a gut feeling. See, the problem is that, this is a Shigoism and I apologize for it. Don't tell me how long you've been doing something. Tell me how long you've been doing something correctly. So someone might be a urban forester tree removal expert for 30 years, but if there isn't any check or counter, there's no way of knowing whether things were justified or not. So, so that's a frontier in the part of the business that I'm involved with.
Yeah, I guess unfortunately the easiest answer is always remove the tree. That's
this is the problem. The easiest answer is remove the tree. Also, it's easy. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's easy to get money for planting. It's very hard to get money for maintenance, especially if maintenance is scouting. So when I say these trees need to be monitored, then somebody needs to be paid to look at them, and more than just look at them, maybe look at them in a careful way. And the response is, no, this is good. I'll see you next year. But see, it's hard to bill on that basis. We're not accustomed to billing for tree services on the basis of, you know, I pay my doctor, even though when I go in there, he says I'm fine, I still pay him.
Thank you again, Kevin, for joining us.